lead the charge, and we started following other school districts and their boards, right? And tried to gear our speeches around what the opposition was presenting. And it helped us tremendously when we would follow Downingtown or Westchester
Gotcha.
or Springford. So then, now it's like a cause. Like, so we've gathered so much that we're able to help other districts at this point find things that they didn't know that they could find. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think from your initial message, so there's, this is kind of like a group or podcast with like Christian based. Is that right?
Yeah. So we were thinking of making like basically a media of
Gotcha.
presenting our side of what we're finding, right? That
Gotcha.
you're not going to find in our Pottstown Mercury or the Reading Eagle or things of that nature. And it's still in the beginning stages, so we're not really sure, but it was like, let's start, parents that we see or school board members that we see are making a difference. Let's get them, let's pick their brain and see what's going on. And how do we, because at the end of the day, we all have individual needs as a district, but there's a way bigger push for especially the vaccinations and CRT coming from Pennsylvania Department of Education, things of that nature, that we're going to have to join forces, right?
Yeah. The reason I ask is because it usually, so if I'm amongst other Christians, I assume you're both Christian, I try to open up in a word of just brief prayer.
Sure.
Just I feel like it kind of sets a good tone for a conversation. So if it's okay with both of you, I'd like to just do that briefly.
I love it. Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for Danielle and for Joe, and just that we can get together and talk and just hopefully pray for each other, and just try to stand up as leaders in our community, and as people of faith, that we can come together and support each other, and just kind of spread the love of Jesus through our own families and through our own interactions with our community, and hopefully, Lord, you can just, in terms of the school board, you can just give me grace and wisdom and patience, and let your will be done, Lord. And just so thankful for this opportunity. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah, really, thanks for doing that, Greg. I think it always sets a good tone. Do you pray in the morning? Do you get into the word in the morning? I
try. Usually we have family prayer at night with my family, and then as far as like just personal prayer, I kind of just do it throughout the day. I should probably set a specific time. A lot of times I will do it right when I wake up, because I hate mornings so bad. I just have to ask the Lord to give me the strength to just get up and wake up and go, get going. Well, usually once I have some coffee and I have a shower, I'm good to go.
That's good. Yeah, it's good to get into the word. It's good to have these little rituals. I think it's great. I mean, it speaks to tradition, right? Yeah. So what type of school tradition did you grow up in, Greg?
So I grew up in Upper Darby, Delaware County, public school, kindergarten through 12th grade. I was raised PCUSA, which is Presbyterian. So I would say there's I don't know how much you know about the Presbyterian. So there's two main Presbyterians. PCUSA is the more left-leaning. PC Presbyterian Church of America is more right-leaning. But I didn't feel like I wasn't really saved in growing up. I just felt like I didn't get a whole lot of basic theology, but it at least allowed me to be open-minded enough so when I got to college, I was able to, I felt comfortable enough to get involved in a group called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and that was a much more biblically based group, which was awesome. And I was shortly after attending that group, I got saved. So that's kind of like my spiritual story. Just a product of public school. And so I kind of know, just from a consumer standpoint, what it is to be a student in public schools. And I think that, allows me to have a pretty good perspective on things.
That's great. Yeah, I was not part of the public school system, but I really believe in, the school board's charter, right? And where you stand if you're elected to the school board. I think it's a very important position, even more so in today's climate, right? So why are you running, Greg?
Well, that's a great question. That's probably the most commonly asked question. So my wife and I both work full time, pretty demanding jobs. And so in the spring, when COVID first started, spring of last year, it was just chaotic, and I'm sure it was chaotic for everyone. And so we're trying to work, from home, and my kids are home trying to learn virtually, and it was a mess, and it was frustrating, and the kids were fighting all the time, and my wife and I were frustrated, but we were like, okay, let's just wait it out. Once school's over, I'm sure the district will get figure things out, and we'll have school in person in the fall, and then we won't have to deal with this. And then I guess mid to late summer, the school announced Downingtown school announced we're going back in person 5 days a week. We're like, oh, great. This is awesome. We can kind of get back to our schedule. Maybe my wife and I are working from home still, but we'll be able to work and the kids can learn. And then a week later, they're like, well, the board changed their mind and said, we're going to do hybrid. We're going to do 2 days a week. And then my wife and I were like, oh man, this is frustrating. But I guess that's better than no days a week. And then a week later, they said, well, we're going to do all virtual. And then at that point, we were furious, just absolutely furious. The American Academy of Pediatrics had come out and said kids should be in school. I think by the end of the summer, the data was pretty clear that kids were very low risk. That the majority of people that were being hospitalized and dying were either senior citizens or people with serious, compromised immune systems. So it didn't really make sense to shut the schools down for most kids because there was almost no risk. And then so we wound up having we moved our kids to private school. They go to a private Christian school, Windsor Christian Academy. And it just blew my mind that Windsor Christian and St. Elizabeth's and all these other private schools were able to keep the schools open, but the public schools weren't. And then I found out that the current school board member from my area was going to run unopposed in the election. And I said, wait a minute, this is crazy. Somebody's got to stand up. So that's when I decided to run. And, it's been a great experience. I love getting to meet people and talk with people, and answer questions. And I've learned a lot about the process of the school board and running for the school board and how it works. And I just feel like it's been a blessing.
Have you found a lot of community support, like any surprisers that come out of the woodworks that maybe didn't have a voice before that reached out to you privately and are excited that you're running?
Absolutely. Yeah. Both, I would say both. So Downingtown, it's comprised of 9 separate regions. Each region has their own rep. So a lot of people in my region, which is Downingtown 6, were super supportive and people were volunteering and donating, which is awesome. But a lot of people from other regions who were frustrated because their rep isn't up for election for another 2 years have been helping out because they're like, well, I want to make a change. I want, I want schools to be open and forced masks and these things to be ended. So I want to get involved, and they've been helping me out too, which has really been a blessing. So yeah, it's been so cool. People are so kind and just so just generous and helpful, and I'm really a people person, so I've really enjoyed all the support I've gotten.
That's great. Are you nervous at all? If do you think your employer would be supportive of you running for school board?
So to answer your first question, I was definitely nervous in the beginning. Yeah. Just because it was something I had never done before. And because, you're dealing with kids and it's not like, you're doing some job that doesn't affect people, even though it's not a paid job, it's very impactful in the lives of kids. So I think I was just nervous because I wanted to do things right. I wanted to make sure that I make a positive impact. But I feel like at this point I've embraced it. The nervousness is gone, and I'm really looking forward to, hopefully winning and serving. As far as worrying about what my employer says, not really, because I don't think I'm doing anything that would jeopardize my employment. I helping kids to stay in school, making sure that even low income kids have the same opportunities that people like myself have, because not everyone can pay thousands of dollars to keep their kids in school. By saying to the private school, some parents can't afford that, and it's not fair that they get a virtual education, which is not as good as a real in-person education. And I don't, I'm really not I guess an inflammatory speaker.
Yeah.
I don't use obscenities. I don't scream at people. I don't use ad hominem. So I don't do the things that you typically would get in trouble for by your employer. So I'm not concerned about that.
Yeah, I only meant like and by no means, right, should employer care if you're running for school board. It's more
Right.
of the cancel culture, right?
Sure.
So like your opposition finding out your place of employment and just trying to make it difficult for you.
Yeah, and I'm sure in the general sense, that's certainly always a concern for people that are not, whose views are not in the mainstream. I'm sure that's always a concern. But I think at the end of the day, for me, if I'm doing things in a godly, Christ-like manner,
Yeah.
I have to be able to accept the consequences, whatever happens, and just deal with it at that point.
I agree. And I think part of our problem in society today is we lack God, right? Or traditions in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
I can tell you growing up, I grew up in public school, and we had traditions. My grandfather would take me every Sunday to church. We'd go out to breakfast, and then he'd visit his parents' gravesite. And it's odd to me because I don't think I've ever visited a grave site, and I'm 39 years old, right? Like other than the funeral, I don't go visit. And I thought about it the other day and was like, I should go visit my grandfather because it's something that he thought was important. And
Yeah.
I think in society, we get away from anything that has meaning. And I think that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing people that don't have ties to family or tradition or values, for that matter. Anything can be gone tomorrow, and it shouldn't affect you in their mindset.
Yeah. And that's certainly what motivates me, and my family. And I feel like, I'll be a better school board representative. I'll be a better member of the community, a better father, and a better husband, the more I'm acting in a Christ-like manner. So I think it certainly is something that helps me out. And I couldn't get through a day without Jesus. So I'm just really thankful that I do have, that I was around people that witnessed to me, and that God spoke to me through, by putting people in my life that cared about me and that shared the gospel with me.
Yeah, that's great. And I also like that you said too that it's not fair to people that can't afford, because that's the position I'm in. COVID affected our family. My husband worked two jobs and was unemployed from both, right? So losing two incomes, I'm fortunate that I can work from home, but we're not in a situation where I can find a private school or Christian school to not make my kindergartner wear masks, or my daughter, not to be vaccinated. So it's important, and I shouldn't have to. I pay enough in taxes that
Right.
I just want a fair, free education for my kids, and they come out being, that they learn how to read, write, and think for themselves. That's all I really want.
Yeah. And I think that, I grew up lower middle class, in Upper Darby. It's, my parents both had, for the majority of my youth, lower level government jobs, clerical jobs. And so I know what it's like to live in a family that's living paycheck to paycheck. When I had, my parents had one car, and there was a hole in the passenger seat under your feet where you could literally see, the ground underneath the car. So I know that not everyone has the means to send kids to private school, to hire private tutors, and they need to be in school learning. It's just a more robust learning experience, and all the data supports that. If you are learning in school versus learning virtually, learning in school it's just a better education. And I think Downingtown has fantastic teachers. It's not a knock on the teachers. It's a knock on the method that the school board and the administrators have forced upon the teachers, and have forced upon the parents. And I'm trying to make a change.
Yeah, I think that's when you talk about the changes that you can make with regard to the students having that opportunity, right? That you didn't have it then either, right? You said you grew up in middle class, right? It's not like you were at a public school, and great.
That's right.
Probably a great public school system. So I guess if there's an level of appreciation there. So what specifically in terms of ideas do you have on how you can, because I think that's great. I feel the same way, right? And I'm very interested in how you can help people. I guess getting into school is one thing, right? But once you get somebody into school, what do you need is there anything in particular that you can do of service, right? Like, I think that's the key word here, Greg, that I want to chime on too, right? This is of service, getting the kids in school, whether it's because of the current situations or in general, right? That's help people who for some reason are in a cyber school, but it would be great if we could get some resources to them to get them into a school, right? This is a service. What are some specific things you can do once you kind of get them in the school? I'm curious.
Yeah, I have so many ideas. I mean, I could talk for hours, but if I had to kind of hone it down to a few, I would say, number one, allowing the kids to be in an environment where, compromised mental health is not something that they have to worry about as much. And what I mean by that is the district has forced kids, the majority of kids, to not be in school 5 days a week. I mean, they started out not being in school at all, and then they did 2 days, and then they did 4.7 days. But when you isolate kids, they get sad, they get depressed, they get lonely, they get anxiety. Human beings are meant and are designed to interact with each other.
Greg, have you seen that? Craig, I don't want to cut you off, but that's an important point. Have you seen that in your community? You don't need to get personal or specific.
Absolutely. Well, and you probably know there have been a number of suicides since the lockdown, since the school lockdowns. There have been there was a teacher and a number of students who sadly took their life. And I don't claim to know every reason why these people took their lives. There's also been, just in terms of CHOP and in terms of DuPont Hospital, and anecdotally, you can just ask any pediatrician. The pediatric ICU and pediatric emergency rooms have been filled with people who are there because of mental health issues. Just ask anyone who works at CHOP, ask anyone who works at DuPont, and they'll tell you it's just been a scourge upon kids. Kids need to interact. Have you ever seen the studies done on? There's a reason they don't let people be in solitary confinement in prisons for more than a brief period of time, because it just destroys your psyche. And beyond just the forcing kids to stay at home and isolating them, forcing them to, when they were back in for 2 days a week, forced masks, even though kids are a statistical zero when it comes to risk of hospitalization or deaths because of COVID. Plexiglass that makes the kids feel like they're in a prison, basically. Social distancing. It's a very dystopian environment that the board, and I don't want to say all the board, but certain members of the board, the majority of the board, and the administrators, and a number of politicians in Pennsylvania have forced these kids into. And it's just sad. And it was never about the safety of the kids. It was always about politics and about a power grab.
And the teachers union, right?
I don't know much about the teachers union. You may know more about that than me, but I mean, to me, ultimately the buck stops with the board. The board are the ones we elected. So I'm sure that the union is calling the board and, and letting their thoughts be known. But I hate when the board tries to punt blame. It seems like they try to blame everyone else but themselves. And, these are your elected representatives. It stops with the board. And that's why I'm running, because I think we need new leadership in there. And so, that's, I think, one of the biggest things is to allow the kids to learn in a happy, safe, joyful environment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
great.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, Danielle, please go.
So I just wanted to touch on the child part. So my daughter's 9. Last year she was in 3rd grade, and she suffered tremendously from anxiety. And when I noticed, so hers, she had a basically germophobia, right? And then you're telling her that her germs could kill her friends or teachers or her, grandmother or grandfather. So she obsessively washed her hands. And I told our pediatrician, and they, gave me some resources, and CHOP was one of them. And I was on a waiting list of 85 kids deep in front of her. I mean, that's sad that they didn't even, and now granted, my daughter was not a risk, thank God, of taking her life, right? But at what point can she get resources to help her? So then she went to school, had to mask, 6 feet apart at lunch, and she said she felt alone. She felt she couldn't hear her friends. She couldn't read their lips because they were too far apart, and she just didn't want to go. She just didn't want to do it, but she didn't want to be home either. And it was just sad because they always say it's the silent killer, right? But they're doing nothing to help it. They're not even, Pennsylvania's not even doubling resources for these kids to get help. Try calling any pediatric psychology office in this area, in all surrounding counties, and you're not going to get an appointment for months.
Yeah, I know. It's scary, and it was completely avoidable. And don't get me wrong, I'm not one of these people that doesn't think COVID's real. Like, of course COVID's real. And if you're a senior citizen or someone with a serious compromised immune system, of course there's measures that you need to take as a parent or as an adult, especially early on before the vaccine was out. But at this point, and it's even last year when we saw all the data that was coming out about how kids were a statistical zero in terms of deaths, it is a self-inflicted wound that the board, majority of the board, and the administrators have placed on the kids, and it's unfortunate.
I agree. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, I think the board has a lot of power. I think you do have to take ownership, and I think a lot of reasons that the blame is passed is because, well, the best way to get along is to go along, right? And you mentioned new leadership. So besides the issues of the day, right, there's still a lot of practical issues that are kind of beneath the headline. Anything there you'd like to rise to the surface as germane to that point?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of issues, curriculum issues, transparency issues. The district, a lot of parents have voiced concerns about the curriculum that their kids are being taught. And again, I want to be very clear. This is curriculum that the board and the administrators have come out with. I've spoken with a lot of teachers, and a lot of teachers have said, look, I don't want to teach this stuff, but they're forcing me to teach this stuff, and I don't want to lose my job. And I certainly can sympathize with the teachers there. It's, again, the buck stops with the board. And I think also the higher level administrators, like the superintendent. And I don't understand why parents aren't allowed to see books. So the excuse they give is, you can't see this book because we have a non-disclosure agreement with Houghton Mifflin, or with whatever the company is that issues a curriculum. Well, don't sign a non-disclosure agreement, and find another company that's willing to take your tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars so that parents can see what they're being taught. I mean, this is not, a private school. This is a public school. These are taxpayers. These are voters. These people should have, if nothing else, because of the sunshine laws, should be able to see what is in their curriculum. And it's concerning that they can't.
Yeah, I think curriculum's huge, right? And that's why the board plays a very huge role, right? These are the literal, I talked about getting into the word in the morning, right? That's a habit. That's a ritual I have, right? So I really appreciate it. You bringing that prayer to the beginning of our conversation, right? These things really do set a tone. So, the things that the children consume, right? Not just what the teachers say, but what is put in front of them, not just the curriculum approved, but what makes its way into the classroom, right? This is so huge. This is the primary issue when it comes to child safety, in my opinion, let alone, the topics of the day, right? It's very important. It has to be the right stuff, all right? It has to be enriching. It has to really help people become good stewards in their community eventually, right? So I think it's a huge, huge, huge responsibility and play a direct role in that, right? So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's exactly coincidence. I think not, right? What was on my mind? I don't think they happened, Greg. But yeah, no, that's very interesting. What else would you want people to know? Like, this is an election. It's a school board election. It shouldn't be political per se, right? So right. I hate talking about like rallying people, right? I really want to speak to the important things, right? So, families are going to have to be motivated to go make a change, right? To go and say, I want to see Greg specifically represent my school district. Is there anything else you'd specifically want to say to these families?
Yeah, well, so obviously you have different groups. I mean, you have Republicans, you have Democrats, Libertarians, Green Party, Independents. And I think it's important, regardless of your party affiliation. This is not a national election. This is a local election. There are local issues at hand here. So I think it's important to consider that. I think sometimes people, they only want to vote their party line. And I think, and I've had a number of people, and for full disclosure, I was nominated by the Euclid Township Republicans. I wound up getting 9.5% of the Democrats to vote for me in the in the primary, which I'm thankful for. But, to people who are Democrats or Green Party, Libertarian, Independents, what I would ask you is, I realize that on a national level, perhaps we may have some disagreement, but on a local level, just consider the things that are at hand. Do you want the schools to stay open? Do you want parents to have the option to wear masks? Do you want the plexiglass removed? Do you want simply a balanced curriculum as opposed to a curriculum that is more of an activist curriculum? Do you want the specter of forced vaccinations? And I know that's a touchy subject, but the last board meeting, one of the board members did imply that it's legal to require vaccinations to go to school. So, do you want parent choice, or do you want you want to be told how to parent your child? And if you don't have kids in the district, but you're still a taxpayer, you have to consider the board just raised taxes by 2%. My opponent was trying to raise taxes more than 2%. She wound up compromising it too, but she actually wanted to raise them more. So, this is money out of your pocket, and especially if you're a lower income, do you want to be paying more in taxes? Do you want to lose your retail job because the businesses that pay the most in real estate tax are shutting down because they're already being squeezed by Amazon and some of these other online places, and now they have to deal with higher property taxes, and now they're going to shut down and you have no job? So, you have to think of the practical applications, and I do think a lot of Democrats and Independents and Green Party people have a lot in common with my local agenda. So I really think that it's going to be a close race in November. I actually counted up all the votes from both primaries, and I wound up getting 6 votes more than my opponent. So I think that gives you a taste of how close it's going to be in November. And I think if you're on the fence about showing up and you think your vote doesn't matter, consider the fact that there was a 6-vote differential. I think every single vote matters. I mean, I know some people with 6 adults in their household. So I think every vote matters. And I think that's all those reasons are why it's important to show up.
That's great. Danielle, did you want to wrap up with anything?
No, I think.
Akira.